Welcome to another edition of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum, and also joining as the fill-in third host is Max Himmelrich of the Deep End Miami. I was corrected earlier about how to pronounce your last name, so old habits die hard.
I take anything. Old habits do die hard.
So that's Max Himmelrich of the Deep End Miami. He's graced us with his presence, and he's becoming our third host for the night. And then joining us at 8:30 will be Greg Likens of the PhinSiders. He'll be talking a whole bunch of other Dolphin stuff, but it's not going to be a whole lot of fun this first half hour because the first thing we have to talk about is the blowout against the Buffalo Bills, which was bad again. It wasn't as bad as the home opener, obviously, but because it looked like the Dolphins actually cared about what was happening this time. But in the end, it didn't turn out to make any difference because it was still a really bad loss. So I don't want to talk about Ryan Tannehill today if I can help it. I really don't want to open up that can of worms. I'm so tired. It's gotten me to not want to be on Twitter anymore. That's how bad it's gotten. And there were a whole bunch of other different issues to look at. The Dolphins gave up 266 yards rushing. They gave up 112 to LaShawn McCoy, and then it was like 100 and something or other to Carlos Williams, and then of course
around 109.
I'm sorry.
Around 109, I believe.
109 to Carlos Williams. And then, of course, Tyrod Taylor, the running quarterback, added his own few yards here and there. So he got about 44 yards rushing. And that all adds up to one really big problem that we still have not been able to fix ever since what's been noted as the mile-high drop from last season, is that the Dolphins cannot stop the run to save their lives. They got run over, or their ankles got broken by people who had broken ankles. I'm looking at you, Brent Grimes. People are trying to say that Brent Grimes is the most consistent player on the team. It's like, yeah, well, that doesn't excuse him from blame. He messed up, and he admitted as such, and I appreciate the fact that he admitted as such, but it doesn't make the problem go away. Brent Grimes got roasted by a guy who was coming off an ankle injury, and they weren't even sure if he was going to play. And not only that, Sammy Watkins even went as far as to say, look, here's how I beat him. So in other words, what Sammy Watkins has done is he's essentially given the blueprint on how to beat Brent Grimes. So exactly how elite does that suddenly make Brent Grimes if there's a very easy way to just beat him whenever you want? He told you about how he moved inside, and after that it was just a matter of getting past him, and he knew that he could burn him whenever he wanted, and he did over and over again. In fact, no other wide receiver on the Bills caught a pass from Tyrod Taylor except for Sammy Watkins. Of course, nobody needed to. Tyrod Taylor only threw the ball 12 times because they got 266 yards of rushing. So the defense pretty much fell apart. The offense, while they were able to move the ball down the field, we still have, once again, this same problem of punching it into the end zone when it counts. This is something we're just going to have to learn to live with as long as Bill Lazor is the offensive coordinator. This offense is primarily a shotgun offense, and that is their base offense now. Shotgun is what they do. There is no under center is the new shotgun. It's the one that you're just going to go to very rarely every once in a while, and then in shotgun is actually our base offense. We're going to be in shotgun most of the time. We're going to be in shotgun in places where we don't think we should be. It's going to continue to be a problem, but the real problem is that Bill Lazor doesn't think it's a problem. So we have a lot of issues. Ryan Tannehill didn't throw any touchdowns. He didn't throw any interceptions either, but he didn't throw any touchdowns, and that's what counts. Lamar Miller got 2 touchdowns, but he could have very well had 3, one receiving, but he decided to try and not use power, and he wanted to just kind of see if he could sneak past everybody. But that's not to say there wasn't some good news. Jay Ajayi did pretty good, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts on the game. And, I mean, really, what did you take away from it? Was besides Ajayi, was there really anything to look to that we could say, okay, that's improvement?
Well, I mean, I don't.
Go ahead, Max.
I don't know that it's improvement, but one thing, and I really dislike doing this fundamentally, but there were some really atrocious calls by officials in that game that cost Miami dearly. The Carlos Williams touchdown that really could have been a fumble into the end zone for a touchback, which we saw during the Dolphins preseason. If you guys remember, there was a play where Joe Philbin challenged it because he thought Damian Williams had crossed the plane, but it actually was a fumble instead of being short. But in this case, it went the other way, and when it was reviewed, it came up that he had crossed the goal line, even though there's pretty good video evidence that says he didn't. But the more disturbing call was actually a no call for the holding on Ndamukong Suh, which followed that big play he made on third down that would have forced Buffalo into 4th and long, when then the official didn't blow it dead, which we all heard about, forcing what could have been a 4th and short. Dan Campbell elected to make it a 3rd and long, on which a holding call was missed, and Ndamukong Suh could have gotten a sack or could have disrupted the play, in which Tyrod Taylor was able to bomb it down into the end zone to Sammy Watkins, which put the game out of reach. At that point, that was the play that put the game out of reach.
Yeah, I mean, the officials didn't do a good job. I would agree with you on that, but I didn't feel like they were calling the game in a biased fashion. I mean, they clearly missed.
No, I didn't feel like that. I didn't think it was biased. I just thought they missed the calls.
Oh, they did, and I mean that's been a reoccurring concern in a lot of games where the officials just are not making good calls, and that's an aspect of where the league has gotten so competitive, and some of the teams are so close that games are decided by bad calls, and it's just there's so much pressure not to have them, and I suppose that's why there's been a lot of discussion about using instant replay to review more plays than they allow right now. I tend to not like a lot of holding and pass interference calls because it gives the referee such latitude to control the game. I mean, you can call some critical pass interference calls and holding calls and do that. But the Suh one was very frustrating because that was an enormous impact in the game. You're right, because Suh clearly had a hold of Tyrod Taylor, and had he wanted to, he could have picked him up and completely body slammed him into the ground viciously and probably hurt him. And I would say they probably would have thrown a personal foul flag on him had he done that. I mean, he's under so much.
Well, and now people are taking it out of context is another issue. People are saying, "Oh, Ndamukong Suh threatened to slam the blank out of Tyrod Taylor," but that wasn't what he did. He told the refs, "If you don't make the call next time, I'm going to have to blank." It wasn't Ndamukong Suh just threatening the refs or threatening Tyrod Taylor.
Right.
It was an honest statement. It was an honest statement. If you don't blow it dead, my job is to slam it into the ground. That's what I'm going to have to do.
Exactly. And they put so much emphasis on protecting quarterbacks that, and I mean, it wasn't like Tyrod Taylor escaped him and made this amazing play. It was Suh had a hold of him. He was just holding on to it, waiting for the whistle to call it, and Taylor just underhanded it out of bounds, which saved them approximately 10 yards because Dan Campbell would not have taken the penalty, and they would have had 4th and long then rather than 3rd and long, and Buffalo would have.
It would have been the same thing. Campbell assumed it would have been an incomplete pass on 3rd down.
Right.
And then that assumption ended up being wrong, but had it been correct, it would have been like 4th and 14 because I think it was 3rd and 4 when they went for it.
So I mean, it
probably would have been the sack distance.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't disagree that was a really poor job. It was frustrating more than anything because Suh they just had a dramatic issue there, and then Suh gets held on the next play to allow that pass, and it was just explicitly bad holding. I mean, not only was the guy outside his pads, he held on to him when Suh tried to separate from him. He was holding him very badly, and I don't know how you can't see that. I mean, that was a very blatant one. But with that being said, other than those 2 plays that cost me, maybe a touchdown, Miami it was a lot more than just refereeing, because other than that, bad calls, like I said, there's been like in the last 5 years, like 2 or 3 games I thought were questionable calls, but I didn't feel like questionable in the sense that the referees seemed to be very skewed on how they were calling the game on both sides. I felt like they were penalizing Buffalo just as bad as they were Miami.
I should have clarified that. I feel bad having not clarified that. I'm not insinuating at all that the refs were biased. I don't think that they were making calls that they should have made. Those calls
they blew a
could have
crucial
very
call.
easily been made against Buffalo.
Yeah, they blew some crucial calls there. That's how I would say that. And I expect the league probably will talk to them. One is, and they do discipline their refs. I'm sure the ref that missed that holding call will get, a mark. And also, I think they're going to tell them that, look, when these quarterbacks are in the grass like that, you have got to blow the whistle. If you don't, I mean, it becomes ridiculous that these guys can't lay a hand on them, but, they are going to allow the quarterback to throw the ball away still. So I think they'll address it. In terms of the game, I haven't been following. I usually don't go on Twitter for the first day or two after a crucial loss like that because there's so much negativity. But I was fairly negative during the game. I wasn't real negative after the game because I was extremely disappointed in the coaching in the game. And I 100% don't feel like Ryan Tannehill played a bad game. I wouldn't say he went out and was miraculous, but he played much better than he did in the Patriots game, in that Buffalo game. I mean, you can only ask so much of him. You already alluded to this, Lewis, but the shotgun, read option that Bill Lazor installed, when he came in as the offensive coordinator, it's been to a large extent figured out, and it has been proven over and over and over, probably for the almost last season, if you go back to the Denver game and the number of games they played, that it just is not that effective.
Well, I don't know, Chad. It depends on what you mean by effective. If it's effective for getting down the field. The problem is that once you're in the red zone, then it becomes a mess.
No, I disagree. I don't think it's that effective in general. I mean, they make plays here and there, but the offense, and I don't understand why. I don't understand the theory behind it, but they group receivers a lot, and so they send receivers out into patterns, and I don't know if they're trying to set picks on the defenders or what they're trying to do, but they more often than not, Ryan Tannehill is looking to throw a ball where like 2 of the 3 receivers are in the very same vicinity of each other, and it makes it very hard to get guys open in separation when you keep having them run routes where they're always running in the same area together. So I mean, that's very frustrating to me to see that. The other thing is it is really what cost them the game was that formation. And I mean, they started the game off, and you're in a hostile environment, and Campbell immediately showed no confidence in his offense to start the game. I don't like deferring right away to start a game from your offense, because that's saying that I don't feel good about our offense. I want to defer the ball and put our defense on the field. And so they come out there, they immediately show no confidence in their offense. The defense comes out, and they do a good job. The defense got Buffalo off the field, and they come out in the shotgun, and they immediately give up the safety. And I mean, so you talk about, I always get frustrated when people are harping on the defense. I'm like, look, they went in, they shut them out, and the offense ran one play, gave them the ball back in 2 points. And the reason they do that is here they are running out of a shotgun immediately in a hostile environment where they're against a team that's going to be blitzing like crazy. It's not a good game plan to help Ryan Tannehill, and it's not a good game plan to help Jason Fox. And it's just the point where it's almost like, how is it not obvious? I mean, to me, because you were Max isn't, but you were on the show with me last week, Lewis, and I explicitly said, Jason Fox, if they come out and they run a lot of shotgun, Jason Fox will get beat, and it will impact the game. And that's exactly what happened. Jason Fox got beat. Jerry Hughes blew through there and blew up Ryan Tannehill. I mean, it's how many times have you seen that happen over and over and over? And it's so I literally explicitly said this is going to happen in this game unless they run a lot more 2 tight end set. And the other frustrating aspect of it is they have the personnel to do it. I mean, Deion Sims and Jordan Cameron are both very talented tight ends.
They had 4 tight ends and 4 running backs active that game.
Yeah, and the other part was we had a very good 1-2 punch going. Ajayi was giving them a good spark and a good change of pace from what Lamar Miller does. He runs a lot differently than the way Lamar runs, and he's harder to defend. And I think they should have came out that game, and I would have been completely fine, if they would have converted just one first down and had to punt or whatever. If they would have just challenged Buffalo, you knew they were missing one of their top defensive linemen. I wanted them to come out, bring out their tight ends, and run Lamar Miller, run Jay Ajayi, and run a lot of screens right at Buffalo. And they didn't do that. They came out into their, immediately that offense immediately gives up the high snap. I mean, because it's rare, but a shotgun formation is more risky than under center to snap the football, and that burned them immediately. And I thought it was just unbelievable. I know Dan Campbell doesn't have a lot of head coaching experience, but they clearly ruined the end of that first half with their clock management, where they left the timeout on the scoreboard when they desperately needed to use it. So I didn't understand when they had gotten that play and they had about 7 or 8 seconds, they just let it run down to 2 seconds on that penalty call. I didn't understand what they were doing there. And then I don't understand the philosophy of why they pass so much in a shotgun formation on a 1-yard line. And I hope I wasn't too offensive on Twitter, but I was going basically off the whole halftime because literally Miami had failed 8 attempts inside the 2-yard line against Buffalo alone in that formation. You were at the game with me in Miami, Louis, but do you remember when they got down to the 2, threw like 2 or 3 incomplete passes, got a penalty for like interference in the end zone, and got a first down on the 1, and threw 4 more incomplete passes or 3 more. I don't remember what it was, but it was just like when you get the ball on the 1-yard line, it's just percentages. It's just plain statistics. All you want to do is either do a really hard run, usually to a fullback, or just quarterback sneak it forward. It's so difficult for any defense, no matter how good they are, to stop a team from getting 1 yard. Whereas when you go out in that shotgun, I know you spread the team out, but they're throwing very difficult quick slant passes or quick outs or fades into the end zone. Those are difficult passes to complete on a consistent basis. And so literally what they do is they take a position in the game where you're in a game situation where you need 1 yard, you desperately want that touchdown, and rather than rely on, you have an all-pro center, you've got Billy Turner, who's a very good run-blocking guard, and you got Ryan Tannehill, who's a very athletic quarterback. I could literally go in there, having no NFL coaching experience, and install a play formation with those 3 players that would be extremely difficult to stop from getting 1 yard. And so to me, it blows my mind that Bill Lazor is not able to comprehend to do that. Now, I know in the second half, and I assume that maybe Dan Campbell said something to him when they got into that scenario again. They did run Lamar Miller in there for the touchdown, but those are critical plays. If you take away that safety to start the game and you score on that 1 yard touchdown run at the end of the first half, that's a 9-point differential, and it's a huge differential with how long your team is on the field. And I thought those were the primary ways that the team lost the game, was doing that and running that formation so much, because it played right into Buffalo's hand to be able to blitz Brian Tannehill a lot more and to be able to take advantage, I should say, of Jason Fox. So that, and the other thing that's very frustrating is, there's been a lot of people patting Izzo on the back for the special teams coach, and the special teams play was horrendous. I mean, I don't know how many kick returns or punt returns we had that were not flagged. We had to be flagged at least 3 or 4 times on our returns for holding. And at some point you start to wonder, like, who is preparing these guys? I mean, how can you have that many mistakes on your return game? I can understand a hold or a block in the back, but when it happens over and over and over, at some point you got to start blaming coaching a little bit, because that is just plain and simple. They do not have the guys prepared to play. They have not coached them properly, so they don't do that. And I think that was showing a lot in this game, that the team was just they were not being given a very good game plan, and they were not having the players really ready to execute at the level they had to. And that's what it boils down to. And you got to, when this game started, I said, this is the biggest game for me for Dan Campbell, because Buffalo had a lot of problems. I mean, they had Percy Harvin's out, and you knew that they were missing, which one of their defensive tackles was out? I can't remember which one was. Yeah, Kyle Williams was out. And Buffalo had, they had a lot of problems in the secondary. They had a lot of things that could have been exploited, and they just failed to do that. And so to me, that comes away that either Dan Campbell does not know how to exploit those things, or he's not capable of having control of his guys that should know how to exploit it. And so it puts a lot of pressure in my mind on, do they have a coaching staff, that's competent or not? That's what I would leave it at.
I think there's a big discrepancy also. This is a situation where you've ended up with an interim head coach who didn't have the same line of thinking as the head coach he had previously worked under, which is a rare situation. Usually the head coach makes all the hirings, and that's why the interim is usually selected as someone who can keep some sense of continuity. Because now you have Dan Campbell, who was around when Tony Sperano was, and he came up from that power football system. And now you're trying to use a head coach with a power football philosophy, with a finesse offense shotgun coordinator, and there's a disconnect. Because Dan Campbell had an offseason to build that team, and that team formulated the way he wanted to instead of Bill Lazor wanted to. You're exactly right. You know what they'd be doing down there on the 1 yard line. They'd be running it. Because we have now a running back who can get those short yards like Jay Ajayi. We didn't have that before. Lamar Miller can do 1 yard. But Jay Ajayi, I have a lot of confidence in him in situations like that based on what he showed. So I think the big discrepancy, I can't explain special teams. I don't know how to explain that. Darren Rizzi usually has that unit incredibly well prepared, and that was very surprising and very frustrating.
I think his responsibilities as the assistant head coach is starting to mess with his ability to coach the special teams up.
That's very possible.
And let me tell you something. Not all the plays on I was initially really impressed with Bobby McCain's special team as a gunner, and you have no idea the disappointment I felt when it was like, Bobby, you went out of bounds first, because it's like, it didn't even look like that he tried to go out of bounds. It's not like he was just unaware of where he was. It was more along the lines of he got bounced out and he saw the ball about to jump into the end zone and he was just trying to make something happen. So even if Bobby did not touch the ball, it would have been wound up the same. So in retrospect, it is a play that got turned into a penalty, but I don't get mad at him for that one, because even if he had did nothing, it would have wound up with the same result.
That's a very good point. Totally agree with that.
Right.
And but it is the principle of the thing that he should be coached. Even if he did get forced out of bounds, I'm sure that was the case. I don't recall the exact play.
That was what it was. There was nobody else around either. It was either him or it bounces in.
Okay. But
that's correct. One thing else I wanted to touch on real quick too was you guys were touching on Brent Grimes, and he did obviously struggle with Sammy Watkins, but to be a little bit fair, in my opinion, Brent Grimes has never been more than an average man-to-man press cover corner. He's much better at zone and reacting to the ball in front of him. He closes exceptionally quick and reacts to the ball exceptionally quick. Now, he has uncommon ability for his size, to jump and things like that. But, let's not, pretend that Brent Grimes is a sub 4.3 ultra quick corner that can recover down the field. He hasn't been that since he's been in Miami. And the reality is Miami is struggling stopping the run, which I believe is primarily due to their lack of talent at the linebacker position. I mean, Jelani Jenkins has very good sideline-to-sideline speed, and that's it. They don't have anybody else. And Cole Macy and Kelvin Shepard are, plain and simple, they are not very good linebackers at all. And with that being
Kelvin
said,
Shepard is not very good. Kelvin Shepard is downright bad. Kelvin Shepard is. Cole Macy's okay. Shepard.
And the after effect of that is you've got to be able to stop the run. And Miami's defensive line was doing a very good job at getting penetration in there. Buffalo was just doing a lot of running plays designed to get behind the defensive line, and you need your linebackers to clean that stuff up. And when they're not, then what Miami tends to do is they want to use players like Rashad Jones to come up and handle that stuff. And that then puts Brent Grimes on more of an island out there, and they wanted him to try to, be the guy on Watkins the whole game. And that was the after effect of it is to an extent, Watkins is right. If you get Brent Grimes one-on-one, the best way to beat him is to try to outrun him, vertically down the field. If you're trying to like fool him on moves and ins and outs and your routes and stuff, he's way too good for that. And, that's just, again, that's a symptom of the defense struggling to stop the run, which requires Brent Grimes to be in a lot more man-to-man coverage, which is just not his forte. He's not like he's terrible or anything at it, but I would much rather see him reacting to the ball in front of him playing zone, but they don't have that luxury when teams are, running the ball as effectively as they have at times on Miami this season.
Yep.
And, I mean, yes, on that note, Sammy Watkins has always given Brent Grimes trouble. I mean, last year it was the same thing. There was that game. I don't recall if it was the Thursday night game or if it was the road game. I'm currently in the car, so I can't look it up. Otherwise, I would. But one of those games, Sammy Watkins was very productive. And I think there's a history of Brent Grimes struggling specifically against a guy like Sammy Watkins. And Brent Grimes does do well in man coverage, but you're entirely right. He specializes in zone because of his athletic ability, not so much his ability to physically just match up with a guy and lock him down.
Right. He's not, not that I'm not saying he's slow, but Brent Grimes is not an extremely fast football player. He's a much more instinctive player that has uncommon body control, and he's very quick, but, I don't want him matching up, racing down the field against their team's fastest wide receivers. That's not what his forte is. And, Buffalo hit some very big plays, and that was a big difference in the game. I mean, yeah, Watkins beat Grimes on that big touchdown pass, but that was just a beautiful throw by Tyrod Taylor. And I don't think there's very many corners in the NFL that could have done much to stop that. If you're going to have Sammy Watkins do a free 40-yard sprint down the field and have the quarterback hit him right in stride, that's pretty hard to stop unless you've got a safety sitting back there. I mean, there's not very many corners that could do much about it.
Okay, I would give Brent a pass because Watkins is fast, except that Watkins was running around on a bad ankle. So I don't give him a pass for that. So I can't in good conscience say, well, Brent was facing off against a really talented player. No, he was playing. Last year Watkins was healthy. This year he wasn't, and he still got roasted. So
well, he did get beat a lot. Brent Grimes did, but I don't feel like if you would have put Bryce McCain, who they completely torched him in the first game, and so I think they were trying to avoid that happening again. And I don't think you want to match up like a young guy like a Bobby McCain, and I just don't feel like Jamar Taylor coverage is as strong a forte for him as it is for Brent Grimes. I like how well Jamar Taylor tackles from a corner position, and I feel he might be a little bit better at like tight press, like against like Patriots receivers where you're trying to disrupt their routes, but I don't know that he would have fared any better trying to cover Sammy Watkins all game. So it was one of those things where I'm sure Miami was really, really wanting to commit a safety to help out a little bit. But the problem was Buffalo was gashing them at times on the ground game, and they needed to prevent that. And again, it all flows back to a team game where if you would quit, putting your defense out there over and over and not giving them points to work with, it helps because, again, Miami had to play this whole game defensively, having to defend the run the whole game. And Miami is a much, much better team, in my opinion, at defending the pass. So if you can get a team into a situation where they don't have the time to just sit there and pound the football, they have to throw quite a bit more. That helps them out tremendously in their ability to play defense. But just because of the slow starts from our offense and just overall, we just have not been a very productive offense. That keeps that defense in a position where they're always having to defend the whole playbook. They don't ever get that luxury very often of, all right, they're down 7 points now where they're going to throw. And that's a lot of people overlook that with the Patriots is you think about the Patriots defense, not that Bill Belichick's bad, their defense isn't good, but how frequently do they get to be playing with a 10 to 14 point lead on defense? That's so much easier from a responsibility standpoint because they're throwing the football. And our offense just has not really helped our defense at all out very much this year at all.
Yep, I have to agree with you, Chad. Ladies and gentlemen, now joining us on our show is the host of the PhinSiders radio show, Greg Likens. Greg, we really appreciate you coming on with us, man.
Yeah, good to be on with you guys. How's everything going?
Everything's going good with us. Everything's not going so good for the Dolphins, it looks like.
Unfortunately, that is the case. Yeah, 3-5 at the midway point of the season. Certainly not what any of us had envisioned when you consider the preseason expectations as of the first 8 games.
That seems to happen a lot with the team, it looks like, Greg. It seems that every year we win the offseason. We always get the best player. We get the best draft pick available. We seem to fix a hole, but in doing so, we seem to be making this situation where we wind up fixing one hole and then breaking another.
Yeah, it's been a tough stretch. Obviously, not making the playoffs since 2008, and obviously, when you bring up winning the offseason, and Dominican Sue, first guy to come to mind, giving that $114 million contract, and by no means am I saying it wasn't a good deal to make, and he's not a good player, but I think that bigger picture, when you examine the tail end of the 2014 season, the run defense was a huge issue, and that was a huge point of emphasis over the course of the offseason from a coaching standpoint, a personnel standpoint. You would assume, as part of that, bring in Dominican Sue, that you'd be able to fix things. And through the first 8 games, now you're looking at a Dolphins defense that's given up over 140 yards on the ground per game and is ranked 31st in the league. And that's perplexing to me, considering all the resources and the thought and hard work that went into trying to avoid that from happening.
Greg, hey, this is Chad Reinenbaum. We really appreciate you coming on the show. We listen to you guys a lot at the PhinSider and just love the detailed information you really give covering the football team. One question I have, I know you're around those guys a lot with what you do, and how would you describe just the feel of the team, the locker room, the players? At 3-5, are they still feeling upbeat, or do you feel there's like they're down or downtrodden, or do you feel like they're still pretty positive they can get back into it, or kind of what has been the vibe around the locker room that you've noticed?
Yeah, first of all, appreciate the kind words. Thank you guys for listening and paying attention to the show. It's interesting. I feel like if the team was 3-5, and again, I know with us we haven't talked about Joe Philbin before, but I've said before on the air, great guy, hard worker, did everything he could to help the Dolphins. I feel like if they were 3-5 under him, then it would be a downtrodden group of guys. And under Dan Campbell, I could just get a different sense. And listen, you can argue, hey, the shine is worn off because those first 2 games were tremendous. The last 2, everything's come down to earth. But I do get the distinct feeling that while the team is disappointed as a whole in how they've performed the last 2 weeks, I don't think anybody feels that the season's completely over. And I think Dan Campbell's setting that tone. He said in his press conference yesterday that he's not going to be affected by it. His team's not going to be affected by it. Do they feel like they still have half of the season to go? And I think that the players are still buying in to what he's selling. I mean, Chris McCain said something that I was telling on Sunday in the losing locker room. He said, Coach Campbell has done a lot for us to make things comfortable, not necessarily comfortable, but he's really formatted this team and some of the routine that they have towards the players, being a former player himself, and has a good feel for that. And he says, we need to start backing him up. So I think that they're still willing to play for their coach. I think the bigger question, though, is whether this is a group that can turn this season around, or whether we have to come to the conclusion that maybe they're not as good as we had anticipated in the offseason. But to answer your question, I don't think this is a down-and-out group. I still think we're going to see a lot of spirited football in the second half of the season.
Yeah, that's the impression that I got during the game. I mean, I was live tweeting. I was not enjoying myself, but I never got the sense that they had just given up. And I know we say that, we just kind of throw that word give up around a lot as fans and as analysts a whole lot, because it looks like, because Chad and we were at the home opener against the Bills, and it looked like there were a bunch of zombies just running around there. Like they didn't even want to be there. But in Buffalo, it looked kind of like that they never gave up. Like even in the last minute, they were still pushing and fighting, if nothing else, than to save their own dignity or something like that. But there was never this sense that they had given up. I'll give Dan Campbell credit for breeding that sort of an environment. But I'm beginning to wonder if, like you said, Greg, I'm not sure that this team has the talent that that is necessary in order to fix the problems. We added in Dominican Sue, yes, but a lot of what made Ndamukong Suh effective was the fact that the linebackers were essentially eating off of his plate. He would eat up the double teams, and then the pass rushers would come in and make a mess out of that. And then if they decided to run the ball, then you would have guys up in the middle who were able to come in and fill those holes and make sure the running back did not escape. I don't think, and this is just me thinking out loud, I don't think Kelvin Shepherd and Koa Misi, Jelani Jenkins, I do believe in, but I don't think Misi and Shepherd, more so Shepherd, have the necessary talent to utilize what Ndamukong Suh brings to the defensive line, because Ndamukong Suh is doing his job pretty much. He was never a big numbers guy, but he made everybody else around him better. I'm just wondering if there's a limit to just how much better he can make people.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point that you make there, because Ndamukong Suh, I mean, I think early in the season he wasn't playing up to what we had all anticipated, but over this last 4 or 5 game stretch, I think we've seen a different Ndamukong Suh. And heck, if you want to point out what Cam Wake was able to do before he got hurt, I mean, that's where I think you can really see the effect of Ndamukong Suh. Suddenly Cam Wake, over a 3 game stretch has 7 sacks, and that's when you can definitively say Ndamukong Suh is taking up blocks and making people around him better. But to your point on the linebackers, I think it's one that has to be taken into consideration when you look at them having the 31st ranked run defense in the league, and in hearing some of the players speak and hearing what Dan Campbell had to say, sounded like there were a few misfits in terms of how they were playing things, but at times in the Buffalo game, that the defensive scheme wasn't the issue. Players were where they were supposed to be. Guys just didn't make plays. And then that's where it comes back to a legitimate question of whether there's enough talent in certain areas of the team.
And I think, this is Max and Rich, by the way. Greg, very nice to talk to you. The weight of what Ndamukong Suh helps a defense is in the middle. When a player where Kelvin Shepherd is should be able to help make those plays. I don't think it comes down to Koa Misi as much, or obviously Jelani Jenkins, who's a very promising young player, but it really, really comes down to Kelvin Shepherd. And on tape, it just looks as if Kelvin Shepherd unnecessarily engages with blockers, sometimes lacks the vision to be able to find an opening, which is actually pretty apparent with Ndamukong Suh there, but it really comes down to his ability to clean up shop. And I've felt that might not be the best fit for Kelvin Shepherd there for our defense. I mean, Koa Misi has played in the middle, and we know his weakness is in coverage. We saw that 2 weeks ago against Dion Lewis. But it could help to try to move Koa Misi into the middle to see if he can clean up Ndamukong Suh. I don't think they're inclined to do that now. We're at a point where that's probably not going to happen, as, what's transpired has already transpired, and the defense is not going to be able to flip the switch and go from 31st to 2nd. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's just how much can we assess for what we need to do next year to help the run defense. I'm not saying the season is over, but we have to accept 8 weeks into the season, our weaknesses are our weaknesses. And with the run defense, it's time to start assessing what to have for next season, because if it's 3 straight years of being a bottom 5 run defense, it's going to be a very, very bad thing for the Miami Dolphins.
It is, yeah, no doubt about it. And I think you're right. We've seen enough of a sample size to get a feel for, what this team is in many different categories. And, that's why I think that for me is one of the overriding, most disappointing and surprising parts of what has transpired so far, just because there was so much thought, work, and resources put into trying to fix some of these issues, specifically in the run defense. The other thing about what we saw there defensively on Sunday is that, with Brent Grimes, listen, he's been a great player. We all know that, but I don't think anybody anticipated he was going to get burned like he did. And everybody is due a bad day. I mean, that just happens to everybody. You talk to great players in league history. Not everybody's going to play their best every game, and he had a poor game. He admitted afterwards, but that certainly didn't help matters when the 12 times that Tyrod Taylor drops back to pass and ultimately throws the ball, that he completes 11 of those, and arguably your best player, one of your best players on defense doesn't get the job done as well. So I think overall, I mean, what we saw on Sunday, and I know you're talking about the full 8 games, which is a good sample size, but a lot of things that could have gone the Dolphins' way just didn't go their way against the Buffalo Bills.
And Greg, to add to your point, it seems like last year Sammy Watkins gave Brent Grimes a lot of trouble as well, and this time supposedly Watkins was running on a bum ankle. So I don't know how badly Brent is still hurt, or even if he is hurt at all, but I find it hard to give him a pass on the whole idea of not every player does their greatest job every game. I understand that, but it speaks volumes to me that every time Brent has gone up against Sammy Watkins, it has looked, well, to put it frankly, it's looked really ugly, and it looks even uglier when you know that we weren't even sure if Watkins was going to play or not because his ankle was supposedly hurting, and he gets roasted like that. I have a hard time giving him a pass.
Well, I mean, listen, if you're looking at Brent Grimes, he's been to the Pro Bowl his 2 seasons with the Dolphins. And, yeah, I mean, maybe Sammy Watkins is a bad matchup for him. I mean, I'm not going to argue that. But I have a hard time of all the issues on this team to suddenly single out Brent Grimes and say, hey, this is a problem here. Because for the most part, I mean, in his career here with the Dolphins, a short, 2+ seasons, he's been lights out and really good. So, of all the things to point out for this Dolphins team in a 3-5 start, I mean, that's going to be one of the last places I look is Brent Grimes, because he's played through injuries, made that great interception in the Tennessee game, despite the fact that we weren't sure if he was going to play in that one. So I think the most valid point you made there is we're not sure exactly how healthy Brent Grimes is either. So, yeah, again, of all the things going wrong with this Dolphins team, Brent Grimes is going to be pretty far down on the list.
Okay, that's fair. I understand that. I can definitely get along with that.
Okay.
Hey, I have one more question for you, Greg. And, again, I know you were throwing a lot at you from the analyst standpoint after the Buffalo game. But obviously, Miami invested the big pick on Devontae Parker, and he's been injured. And I know that's been frustrating. And I was just curious. I mean, I've seen some people talk to him here and there, and he's he comes out to me as a really nice kid that is a little bit shy on camera. He doesn't like to be like, the guy that's the center of attention, if you will. And, I know that you get to be around the players a lot. How has he been? Is it that psychologically, it's got to be really hard as a rookie that he's been dealing with getting his foot back to being right and just hasn't been able to get out there. And I know part of that is that Rashard Matthews came out of nowhere to be having his best season ever. But, I mean, does he seem like he's pretty upbeat? Do you think he's going to, get back, or do you think this is going to be more of just a red shirt year for him and we're not going to see much of him?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I mean, doesn't matter which team you are, doesn't matter what your expectation level is in terms of the outlook for the season. You expect your first round pick to come in and make a contribution right away, and he really hasn't done anything so far. It's been a combination of the injury, which you accurately mentioned there, but also, I mean, Dan Campbell said a few weeks ago, like, who are you going to take off the field? I mean, you need Kenny Stills out there to stretch the defense. And listen, don't get me wrong, I love the prospect of Devontae Parker, because he brings a different dimension that none of the receivers have in terms of his strength and size combination. But, Rashard Matthews, you can't take off the field. Jarvis Landry, at times, looks like he's the entire offense, so the way they're utilizing him. So that's part of it. And from being around him, he is a nice kid, very shy, and he just isn't a very talkative guy. I think around his teammates more so than around the media. So that's just something that is part of his personality. I think he's remained upbeat, but I'm getting more and more resigned to the idea that this is going to be a redshirt year for him, just because the talent that's in front of him. In addition, the fact that his foot injury continues to linger like this is worrisome. And it's going to get to a certain point where I wonder whether they're going to be better off just making sure he's completely healthy for next season, depending on how these last 8 games go. I'd love to see him get more involved, because I was draft night really excited at the prospect, but it's looking more and more like of all the rookies that's going to make a big contribution in the second half of the season, it's going to be Jay Ajayi, the 5th-round pick, as opposed to Devontae Parker, the 1st-round pick.
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to just redshirting Devontae Parker. I mean, the kid missed out on his entire training camp, so he didn't get to really get a feel for the speed of the NFL or exactly what it takes to be able to get used to that level of intensity. Even under Joe Philbin, the intensity level that comes the jump in intensity that comes from college to the NFL, no matter who your head coach is, it's something to get used to. And the fact that Parker couldn't, it makes me more willing to let Parker have a redshirt year and hopefully to protect his foot so he doesn't wind up turning into Yatil Green 2.0 if you remember him from a few years back.
Yeah, for sure. Because at some point you want to make sure that long term you can rely on him. So it's going to be an interesting balance to have to strike there. Unless somebody gets hurt in that receiving core ahead of him on the depth chart, then perhaps there'll be an opportunity. But barring that, it's not looking good that he's going to make the type of impact that I think we all anticipated for a 1st-round pick.
And the other thing that's worth noting regarding the redshirt year for him is that we don't necessarily right now at this point in the season need him. We have Rashard Matthews playing well, and if we need someone to come in the 4th quarter, because that's when he's been playing, he hasn't been playing early in the game. If we need someone to come in late, then why not make it Matt Hazel? Why risk sending Devontae Parker out there for reps that have no meaning if it's just going to risk aggravating that foot injury? And we all know, as devastating as other types of injuries can be, foot injuries always seem to nag players, and they always seem to come back. I mean, we've seen it. What Des Bryant is doing right now is remarkable because Des Bryant is remarkable. But, I mean, we saw it last season in the NBA with Kevin Durant. The foot injury that just wouldn't go away. And what finally helped him? An entire offseason of rest. So that's what could do it for Devontae Parker instead of throwing these meaningless reps at him. And like you were saying, Greg, you're exactly right that he's not necessarily on the field as much as you would think he'd be because Rashard Matthews has showed up so much out of nowhere. And we've gotten such a good contribution from him, and he's been such a reliable player for us this season that you really can take a step back and say, okay, we might want to let Devontae Parker take this year and just get himself healthy and then come in next year. It could be an entirely new staff next year as well. It could end up not mattering because he could have to relearn the whole offense again. We don't know. So it's just a matter of seeing what is the real benefit of playing him this year.
Yes, I agree. And, part of that, like you're alluding to there, is going to be determined by the record of the team and all that stuff. And I mean, I would think that medically speaking, they would have to be absolutely certain that he's not going to be able to re-aggravate something, which I don't think is possible. But you know what I mean? They'd have to be really, really confident that if he went out there and got some of those reps late in the season, that they feel good that it's not going to have any sort of long-term damage to the foot. Otherwise, I agree with you. Heck, I work with a guy that unfortunately saw his career end sooner than it should have, and O.J. McDuffie. I mean, he's had a toe injury, but it's all in that same region, and so you hope they take every precaution necessary. The flip side of that, though, for me, though, is it's just so frustrating because there's all the anticipation, the build-up, so much is put into the draft process, and I know we talk about it for half the year, it feels like, and to use a first-round pick and feel so good about the talent you're getting, there's no denying the talent. We saw it out there in the off-season workout program. It's just frustrating when you can't see it come to fruition on the football field in year one, because we know the great teams over the history of the NFL and the teams that can sustain success, they hit on their draft picks and they get contributions. And we still need to see that consistently from the Dolphins.
Yeah, going along with that, Greg, I made this comment about a day after the Buffalo game, and I don't know if it's bad luck or bad recruiting or what it is, but in that Buffalo game, Miami only had 2 number 1 picks that they've drafted in the last 10 years playing. And I mean, that's, as you mentioned, the number one draft picks, you know, you're hoping you're bringing in an all-pro caliber player, but you're definitely looking to bring in a player that's going to be a significant contributor to the football team. And the reality is, for all different reasons, you know, obviously Deion Jordan's reason is a lot different than Devontae Parker's reasons. And, you know, obviously Juwan James has been very stable, other than, you know, he was hurt, you know, the prior game. But it tells you a lot of the reasons on why Miami is struggling. And if you are questioning talent, is that, you know, those good teams, you know, that are consistently good, like say the Green Bay Packers or like the Pittsburgh Steelers, that
or the
seem
Patriots
to always be very competitive, is they have a knack for getting their players that they draft, you know, up to that level and ready to go. And I feel like it's just kind of leading into another question. I'm wondering what's going to, as we come into this offseason, you know, we are going to have to be looking at being, you know, creative on our cap, and there's going to have to be some difficult decisions made. And I feel like, you know, we've got Lamar Miller up to where he's a very high level running back right now in the NFL. And, you know, he's coming into free agency. And Rashard Matthews, if we're in, you know, in a tight cap situation, how do you pay Rashard Matthews when you've got Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker, and Jarvis Landry all on the team, and a promising young guy in Matt Hazel? And so I get concerned that Miami is again heading down that road where we've got some younger players, but we just aren't getting them here on the long term. And I don't have a good answer for that, but I don't know if you've heard much, you know, where it's probably way too early to be talking about that, what you think will happen with Lamar Miller or Rashard Matthews. But do you feel like they'll be in the Dolphins uniform next year, if you were to wager a guess anyway?
Yeah, it's an interesting proposition, and I haven't thought a whole lot about it, knowing we've got 8 games left. But if I had to guess, and I agree with your reasoning there, I mean, I would say at this point, when we look at things, and this could change over the final 8 games, depending on how Jay Ajayi performs, but I think the team needs Lamar Miller more than they need Rashard Matthews. And take nothing away from Matthews. Love him as a person. Love the way he's come together and put his hard work after being a 7th-round pick to suddenly being on pace for an 1,100-yard season. I just feel like with the names that you just mentioned, they essentially invested a 3rd-round pick in Kenny Stills this year. They invested a 1st-round pick in Devontae Parker. We all know what Jarvis Landry means to the team. So you got those guys. You got Hazel waiting in the wings. You don't necessarily, and again, take nothing away from Matthew, you don't necessarily need him as much as you would need a Lamar Miller. Now, you could argue that running backs you can find them in the draft and all that other stuff in terms of utilization across the league with 2 or 3 back systems. But I would say, as great as Rashard Matthews has been this year and has been probably the pleasant surprise on the team, that he would be the guy that they'd be more willing to let go, considering what they have on the rest of the roster.
I think you're.
Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right on that. And the other thing that you have to look at, the way the NFL wanted to encourage team building is through the draft because of the way the new CBA works for rookie contracts. These rookies are so cheap for teams that we have a player like Jarvis Landry for a bargain. So the question then changes. It's not, do we continue to pay the player as it used to be? It's now, do we start paying them, and can we afford to do so? And I think you're entirely right, Greg, that it might end up being Lamar Miller because of what we have at the receiver corps for more years. I mean, we have Kenny Stills, Jarvis Landry, and Devontae Parker all on their rookie contracts, which means we're saving money on them. And I think we can all say that we can save some cap by probably getting rid of Greg Jennings next offseason and really save some money in the receiving corps and take advantage of the situation that the NFL has created for teams in which they have these low cap numbers for young players. We saw with the Seattle Seahawks, what they built on that Super Bowl team. The reason they could afford to pay so many players is because up to now, they weren't giving Russell Wilson $20 million a year. And there's nothing wrong with giving your franchise quarterback money. It's just a question of where else can you save. And I think you're entirely right that it could end up being Rashard Matthews, given the situation with the other contracts that we have on the team.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but yeah, it makes the most sense. But it's unfortunate considering you did invest a 7th-round draft pick in him, and there's so many seventh round or late round draft picks that never pan out. So for him to develop the way he has under, the tutelage of the Dolphins organization, it's a disappointing thought that could be a possibility. But as we know, and as you referenced there, I mean, it's a bottom line business. So there's going to be some tough decisions that need to be made, especially, if they, and they're on the pace to not have the type of season that we had all anticipated, or at least I had anticipated going into this year.
And it's not to say he won't be missed. That's not what I meant. What I really meant was that if we had to pick one of those two players, I mean, Rashard Matthews has a great chemistry with Ryan Tannehill. They came in the same class. He's obviously shown what you want out of players, which is even when they get frustrated, and after Rashard Matthews did make some public comments about wanting to leave the team, he ended up being able to put that behind him and play good football like a consummate professional. He put his job ahead of his personal feelings and went out and played good, hard football for the Miami Dolphins. That's what he continues to do this year. And I think his presence would be missed a lot on this football team next year in the locker room and on the field.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. But, I think you make some very good points there in terms of what's going to be a priority, and it's not take nothing away from Rashard Matthews, but they've got a lot of young talent there, and the money makes sense, and so that's a big part of this business for sure.
Hey, Greg, I have one more question for you while we still got you here. Have you talked to or seen much of Cameron Wake since he's been injured? Is he pretty down, or how are you feeling about the situation? I know it's a very severe injury, so I'm sure there's a lot going on in his mind about, is he going to maybe think about retiring, or is he, really determined to get back to where he was, or have you had any interaction with him?
I haven't spoken with him. I did see him yesterday, and I know really nobody's seen him outside of the building since the injury. He does have a cast on that foot, area, the whole leg area, really. And he's on crutches, but I think the encouraging thing is he's with his teammates. He's attending meetings, from what I know, with the defensive linemen. So I think he is going to still be very involved in the team, and in talking to some of the young players on the team. As much as he's a great player, he's also a great presence and leader for them in the locker room. So I anticipate that he will continue to do that despite the injury. In terms of whether he's planning on retiring, I think a lot of that conversation is coming from the outside. If I know Cam Wake, his plan is to rehab this injury as long as it takes and get back to playing on the football field. So I think it's probably premature for us to be considering retirement. Now, I understand some of the speculation about whether he'll be a Dolphin moving forward, considering his age, the injury, and the cap number. But I think Cam Wake, in football years, is still relatively young by comparison, or in contrast to his actual age, just because he's such a late bloomer in the National Football League. So I can't imagine a scenario, unless this injury just doesn't go away, that he won't at least make his best effort to be back on the football field next season.
And I agree with you there, Greg. One more question before we let you go. We've had you for a while, and we want to let you get on with your night. We saw a lot of potential in Jay Ajayi, and really it stunned me just how good he was, especially since he only showed like little flashes of something like this in the last preseason game. I think the concern before was his ability to pass block, but if this is the kind of I want to ask you this, and I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot or not, but it really makes me wonder. You see Lamar Miller, you see Jay Ajayi, you see these guys having so much success running the football, and it boggles the mind that you have these Dolphins who are more successful running the ball than pretty much any team in the NFL, and yet they run it less than any team in the NFL. I understand the whole concept of we're behind to throw the football, but we've already seen time and time again, pretty much all year, that becoming a one-dimensional offense essentially guarantees that the offense can't function. What is your thoughts on the whole idea of why they seem so willing to abandon the run so quickly? We've seen it in years past. We've seen it this year. I mean, I wish I could understand why they were always so quick to abandon the run, especially with all the success they've had with it.
Yeah, that is a valid question. It's been a bit of a mystery in the first 8 games. I mean, I do think that we've seen a distinct difference since Dan Campbell's taken over as the head coach, and he's made that a point of emphasis that they're going to establish a physical style of running the football. You get down 9-0 against the Bills, that certainly doesn't help things. I don't think they completely abandoned the run on Sunday. The New England Patriots game, that's a completely different story. But I think so far in 3 out of the 4 games that Dan Campbell's been the head coach, that they've done a much better job. Now, do I think they could run more? And to your point, certainly. I mean, they've been very effective, as you pointed out, in terms of the yards per carry. I am hopeful that with Jay Ajayi now emerging, and again, small sample size, but I think that he can be the perfect complementary back in terms of bringing that physicality and downhill running style with Lamar Miller's speed and breakout ability. So that has been frustrating, I think, for all Dolphins fans. But I think overall, 3 out of the 4 games, we've seen positive signs that they're moving in the right direction in terms of being disciplined and staying with the run for longer, even if you have a deficit early in the game.
Yeah, we've noticed that it's a little better, but we were just hoping that we'd finally get like at least 15 carries out of Lamar Miller every once in a while. We're not even asking him to be a workhorse back. We're just saying let's give him the ball more because he makes plays when he gets his hands on the ball. The game against the Texans was proof of that. It's just even he's even gotten better as a weapon out of the backfield, and we were really hoping that he would really become a focal point of this offense. Just hand the ball off, let him run the ball, let him catch the ball, just get the ball in his hands. So similar to what Jarvis Landry's been able to do. And one final point that Chad tells us about all the time, and it really does get on our nerves too, is the whole idea of the Dolphins' base offense seems to be in the shotgun. And that's really what makes the whole anger issue with the running game happen, because we saw it in the Bills game. We were on the 1 yard line, and instead of ramming it down their throats like a Dan Campbell offense I would imagine would, we went right back to what the issue was the last game against the Bills, and we just tried to throw it in there from shotgun. And that in itself is already speaking to they still want to play finesse football.
Yeah, that was a frustrating sequence to say the least, and I've resigned myself to the fact that as long as the current offense is in place and Bill Lays is the offense coordinator, I mean, they're going to run the ball out of the shotgun for 90% of the time. So it's different than I think what we're all accustomed to, maybe different than what everybody would like, but that's going to be what they're going to do. And the thing about the play at the end of the first half with Deion Sims being the target there, I mean, the frustrating part there is in hindsight, you look back and they scored a couple of 1 yard touchdown runs at the goal line with Lamar Miller. So they had success doing so. I think that would be my only question mark there is the play call. And more specifically, if you're going to throw the ball, who you're targeting with the ball. But I understand the frustration running the ball. I think that there's a laundry list of frustrations offensively and defensively with a 3-5 start for this Dolphins team. So we'll see. Hopefully they can turn things around on Sunday against the Eagles, but time will tell.
Yep, time will definitely tell. Well, thanks, Greg, for coming on to our show. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your night to come and talk to us, man.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed talking to you guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
All right. Have a good one, guys.
Good night. All right, so that was Greg Likens of the FinSiders, and Greg is really cool about this sort of thing. He likes to come and chat with all the fans. He does a lot of different podcasts, and we really appreciate him coming on. Again, Greg, thanks for joining us and giving us your insight and your perspective on things. So, guys, based on what he said, what did you feel about the whole discussion?
Yeah, I felt it was, great insight. especially knowing that Cameron Wake is there in the building. That's something that, no one in our position would know, because Cameron Wake keeps a low profile regardless of whether he's playing or injured. I mean, you don't see a lot of pictures of Cameron Wake hanging around places. You see a lot of pictures of Jarvis Landry and Ryan Tannehill at events and everything. You don't see a ton of pictures of Cameron Wake. So it's good to know that he's still in the building and that he's still involved with this team, because he's not checked out, because that's not his attitude. And there's no reason to expect that it would be, because of who he is as a player. And I mean, I know, Lewis, you and I have talked about it. He was, growing up, like, he's the guy. Because I came in a little bit too late for the prime years of Jason Taylor and Zach Thomas. And so when our offense didn't really have anyone, it was really Cameron Wake. That was the guy. And so knowing, it's cool for someone who's such a big fan of him to know that he's still in the building and he's still working with the team in that way, and that I personally continue to hold out hope that he'll be a Dolphin next season. I'm fairly sure he'll be playing, but I sincerely hope that he's a Miami Dolphin in 2016 and beyond.
Yeah, I hope so too, Max. I mean, I hope he can get back to where he was at, because Cameron Wake was special at rushing the passer. I mean, this quickness off the ball is just unparalleled. I mean, we've had good defensive end, and I loved Jason Taylor. He was special in some of his talents, but I've never seen anybody that could explode that quickly off the ball that played for the Dolphins, that literally just can be unblockable. He's so fast. And so
he gets his angle. His angle is unbelievable. Like, you're talking about the explosiveness, he dips further than any defensive lineman can. He's almost at the ground, but he's still running full speed. He's an absolute monster.
Oh, right. So I worry because Achilles injuries are extremely difficult to rehab, and I'm hoping that he can get back to being at that level. And Greg touched on this too. It's going to be hard because next year, they're going to have to be making some very difficult salary cap decisions, and Cameron Wake is a high-paid player. And at some point, they're going to probably have to make a decision before they know he's going to be back, and what they're going to do with him. And Cameron Wake, I thought, actually signed a very team-favorable deal with the Dolphins. I mean, he's paid very well, but at the time he signed that deal, it was kind of a risk or benefit for both, because he signed it when he had another probably close to league minimum contract, and he had clearly become an elite player. So they gave him a year ahead contract, and it kind of worked out for both of them. But you just hope not to see him. And it's going back to that first round pick, it was crucial that we would have been so nice to have Deion Jordan right now, because he's an extremely talented football player. And when I saw him on there, I thought he probably was the second best. I believe he is a better pass rusher than Olivier Vernon. I think he's still got a lot of work to do, but he was able to get heat on that quarterback, and it'd be so nice to have him right now. And everybody was making fun of me earlier in the year because I said, don't be shocked if Deion Jordan is back next year and he's going to be starting for this football team, because now with the Cameron Wake injury, he's going to be a major question mark on whether he's physically going to be able to return next year, and at what time will he be physically ready to return.
I mean, if he returns as a Dolphin at all.
Yeah, if at all. And then we get Derek Shelby is going to be a free agent, and Derek Shelby is no slouch. He's definitely going to get a decent contract, because he could probably start on a few teams right now.
He's the balanced guy.
Yeah, but I mean, he's a very solid football player. I mean, he's got a good mix of run defense, as well as he still is a decent pass rusher as well. So again, as you touched on, Max, in this league, if you are going to put your money into getting elite players like Ndamukong Suh, then you got to plan on using your draft to fill out some of the rest of your roster, and that makes it hard to maybe bring a guy like Derek Shelby back. You're going to maybe have to think, all right, maybe we're going to have to rely on Deion Jordan here. We're going to have to we'll have Terrence Fede back, and we're going to have to draft our defensive end, because we can't pay Olivier Vernon, we can't pay Derek Shelby and all these guys to be back. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that at all. And that, again, it makes Deion Jordan critical, because they invested a huge pick, a third overall pick into him. And
they had to trade up.
Yeah, they had to trade up.
Yeah, exactly. And you just hope that he can, maybe this year off will really be eye-opening for him because they desperately need him to come in and be a solid defensive end for him, now more than ever coming into the next season, because we're literally looking at pretty much Terrence Fredette and everybody else has the potential to be gone that are defensive ends right now.
And yeah, I mean, when you really look at it too, it's not a situation like Juwan James, where Juwan James struggles at times, and he's a good player. He's not a great player. When you trade up to get someone at number 3 in the world, you need a great player. You need a high-level contributor. Deion has the ability, you were saying, Chad, he could rush the passer. He's underrated in coverage. He's very underrated in coverage, and that's something where you see this team miserable in. Absolutely miserable in linebacker coverage. We all saw what the Patriots did to us with Dion Lewis. I mean, we saw it. They burned the linebackers, and obviously Rob Gronkowski did, but Rob Gronkowski's going to burn every linebacker. So,
to be honest, Max, I judge the Patriots different than any other team because it's.
But I mean, even a little bit. I mean, I know that they're obviously going to get us places, but we shouldn't be. I mean, we've all seen the Comisi play, where he had his ankles just completely broken by Dion Lewis. It's because we're undermanned. We don't have anybody who can go out there and cover with Dion Lewis. We don't have somebody who can go out there and run with Gronk. And the problem is when you try to do things like bring Rashad Jones down, that's why play action kills this football team. Because Rashad Jones is trying to play linebacker and safety at the same time. So you end up with a situation where he can't do everything, so they're going to burn us deep when Rashad Jones is trying to come up and make tackles.
And that's back to your linebacking core. And I don't believe, to be honest, that Deion Jordan would be able to do a whole lot better in every down. Yeah, I know he's covered Gronk at times, but Deion Jordan, I don't know what he's looking like right now, but when he came into this year, he was running around 270, 275. He has the physical talent to be an elite defensive end. I know he has ability that he can play strong side linebacker at times, but we need some more athletic, real linebackers. And I was something I was really hoping on in the draft, and I don't believe that Jordan Phillips was a bad pick. I'm definitely not saying that. I suspect that next year he'll be starting alongside. He's not a bad pick. I don't have any issue with him personally, but
I'm wondering if Matt's theory is correct and that Tannenbaum drafted with some of Philbin's ideas in mind and the others part of whoever turns out to be the next head coach, because that's what he said, is that essentially Jamil Douglas and I think it was Ajayi was one of them, that they were Philbin players, and then you got a guy like Jordan Phillips who's a insert coach here player.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to get really good D tackles in there. Their defensive tackles and offensive tackles both are such a talent-based position. I mean, you need to be big, you need to be quick, and there's just only so many guys on the planet that can do those things. And when you can get your hands on them, I mean, they're very valuable. But with that being said, there's always the trade-off of, yeah, you got this valuable player, but Miami seems to be getting into this trend of doing that. And he gets you nowhere. So, they did it with Deion Jordan was another very good example. When they moved up and grabbed Deion Jordan, they're doing it because they feel he's so talented, but they didn't need him at all. When he was, and that was the problem with him as a rookie. Everybody's like, well, he's not playing. And the reason was like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to pull Cameron Wake off the field? You're going to pull Olivier Vernon off the field right now? It doesn't, he's not better than those guys. And so the question isn't about him playing. The question is, why did you make this move to draft a guy you did not really need? And we're touching on that with Devontae Parker right now. It's like you drafted Devontae Parker, but this season it's clearly obvious they don't really need him. I mean, I want to see him on the field because he is a very talented player, I believe, but he's not really a player that's contributing to the team because they need it. And Jordan Phillips, again, it's like, so you've got C.J. Mosley, you've got Ndamukong Suh, you've got Earl Mitchell. Not that Jordan Phillips isn't a nice luxury to have, but
and Phillips is playing ahead of Mosley right now.
And he should be. Yeah. I mean, he's a good player. But my question is how much better would our run defense be if we had taken maybe Perryman to man the middle linebacker, because that guy's an absolute tackling machine.
Your run thumping guy.
You need it. I know everybody wishes you could have Zach Thomas back because he was so special, because he could cover really well, and he stopped the run. I mean, he blew plays up all the time. But, I mean, right now, we just lack that dynamic playmaking at linebacker, and you've got to stop and think is that, yes, I like the Devontae Parker pick. I like talent. Yes, I like the Jordan Phillips pick. I like the talent. But, what if we had used our first-round pick and drafted a linebacker instead? We might be in a completely different team right now if we had another, all-pro level linebacker and they're playing behind Sue and Earl Mitchell versus having the next defensive tackle ready to go maybe next year in Jordan Phillips. And so that's easier. It's easy for me to say that after the fact, but I mean, at some point, this team has to start drafting players that come in and play. I mean, we can't afford to be this team anymore that's drafting guys based on potential. We need guys that can come in and actually play, when the season starts. And that's, I think, more than anything, the reason that the teams have struggled for a while is we just are not getting contribution from our draft picks like other teams are.
And yeah, I wrote about this on the site today. If the Miami Dolphins have the draft and free agency backwards, free agency should be used to add on to the team that you're building through the draft. It's not that Miami should say, "Oh, let's go out and sign Ndamukong Suh as our main, let's build around this guy player for this year." It should be, let's go out and draft someone, and that's who we build around. Because if instead of signing a free agent to stop the run, we could have drafted a player, and that's exactly what you're saying, Chad. We're running into these issues where we're simultaneously not acquiring the right players and not using the players that we do acquire. This year, it looks like the draft got better, and it has since Dennis Hickey got here. Dennis Hickey's done a pretty good job drafting for this football team. I mean, Jarvis Landry in the second round is awesome. He's clearly a first-round level player. Then you had Jawan James that same year, who was an instant contributor, and that's where you saw the team improve last year. Our football team got better last year. The problem is we didn't take a jump forward from 2014 to 2015 like we did 2013 to 2014, when we saw Jawan James and Jarvis Landry make instant impacts as first and second round picks. This year, we're not seeing impact from our first and second round picks, which is why we're looking like the Dolphins of old. We need players not only that will develop into stellar players, but we need to draft at positions of need. Drafting best player available is awesome when you're the Green Bay Packers or the New England Patriots, but we're not. We have needs on this roster that have to be filled, and it's impossible to go best on board when you have those needs, because that's when you see us waiting until the fourth round to pick an O-lineman. And
right.
when we pick...
It's an important aspect of coaching that I think gets overlooked a lot is the development of players. And you take a look at the Miami Dolphins defense right now, which has, they've been struggling at times against the run. And I look at it, and this is a criticism that I think is justified of the coaching staff, not like Dan Campbell personally, but just in general is, all right, Brent Grimes was not a player developed by us. Michael Thomas sort of is, but, I mean, he was brought in as a free agent. Kelvin Shepard was not a player drafted or developed by us. And Ndamukong Suh is not a player drafted or developed by us. And you get so many of these players that they brought in, and I was almost kind of mocking them early on because of the Bryce McCain being moved out to the boundary, which it didn't work out. I was critical of it when it did because I was thinking, you drafted Jamar Taylor in the second round to come in here and be a starting caliber cornerback. And then when it gets down to it, when you've got to decide we're getting ready to go into battle here, they decide they feel better with Bryce McCain, who I'm saying, all right, so you feel better using a player somebody else developed and coached, not the guy you developed and coached.
Don't forget last year, Chad.
What's that?
Don't forget last year, the same thing, Cortland Finnegan.
Yeah, and part of me is like, you as a coach, you've got to feel like you can bring a guy in and coach him and get him prepared. And to me, that was almost like them, they're not going to openly admit that if you ask them that question, but that's what I'm thinking is like, so you would rather bring in a player in free agency to put in there rather than use your own guys. And so I think they've done that a lot. Now, fortunately, on offense, you see it start to pay dividends. Jarvis Landry is their guy. Rashard Matthews is their guy. Lamar Miller is their guy. Deion Sims, Ryan Tannehill. And so they're using a lot of the players they've drafted and developed. And, I mean, to me, it's becoming more and more obvious if you look at the successful teams. That is the template. That's how you get a good football team. And I'm hoping they can kind of, really focus on that into the next few years, because we need to get Deion Jordan, right. We need him to get back out in the field, and they need to develop him. And they're going to have to do that with Devontae Parker and other players. We can't be relying on signing a Greg Jennings that was somebody else's player they developed in the hope that we can just put him in there and not use our own guys. So that's going to be a real resounding thing. And then leading in, to the next topic, Jay Ajayi. I was excited to see him. I got to give you guys a little bit of cautious optimism. I think he's quite a bit lower running back right now than Lamar Miller. Jay Ajayi is extremely talented at cutting. I've never seen anything like it watching him in college, of how fast he can make a cut. And it's a great talent to utilize when you get a defense that's a little bit tired. He's an exceptional change of pace back. So if we get a team tired into the third and fourth quarter, and you bring a guy in that can cut like Jay Ajayi, he will leave people smoked. But I don't think he's very, very disciplined at understanding the running lanes. I think he runs upright a lot, that exposes himself to injury. And so I kind of was glad to hear Greg, because I always feel like he has a little bit better feel on the team on what maybe they're kind of think about doing, because I think it's imperative that we get Lamar Miller back next year. They spent a lot of time developing Lamar Miller, and he's a very good player now. He can catch the ball well. He knows what he's doing in the offense, and him and Jay Ajayi together, to me, is the ticket of get Lamar Miller back here, keep those guys together, and let's not have to worry about adding another running back, because I think it'd be a crucial mistake to go into next year and feel like you can just elevate Jay Ajayi to the number one running back, because he really isn't a complete back in my mind. He's an exceptionally talented back that maybe in 2 to 3 years could be the featured back, but I don't know if he'll ever be the guy you want to be the featured back. We'll have to see that on how his career plays out.
And also, you've got to wonder. He fell for a reason in the draft. There are noted medical concerns. It's not an immediate concern in the sense of a player who might have, an ACL issue or something like that. His issue is more with longevity. People wonder how long Jay Ajayi will be able to make it. So it is very risky. I totally agree with you, Chad. We should not go into next season and say, Jay Ajayi came in the last half of 2015 and ran for 600 yards and made a lot of plays, so let's make him the feature back. He's a player he's a good contributor, and he's someone who's good to have on the team, but he's not someone that you want to put a large investment into in terms of being a guy who's going to start for your team for a whole season.
And it's funny, guys. It's that it's pretty sad that we're already talking about the draft like this. And really, just to bring up your point about Greg Jennings specifically, Chad, it's funny because we and a lot of other people were very much applauding the signing of Greg Jennings because of a veteran presence, somebody who knows how to run his routes and all that other stuff. And at first, it looked like it was going to pay dividends, but I don't know what happened. I don't think Greg Jennings comes off as the kind of guy who just folds under pressure. It's just I don't know if maybe somebody chopped off his fingers, because suddenly Greg Jennings does not look like the same Greg Jennings we were applauding the signing of, or the Greg Jennings that we saw in the preseason where Tannehill could count on him. I don't understand what happened.
He's one of the most, in my opinion, he's one of the most disappointing players on the season, and maybe it's just a matter of bad luck or circumstances, but he's had he had another big drop in this Buffalo game, and he's essentially fallen off the depth chart because of Rashard Matthews, because Matthews is doing everything out there to make a tough catch. And the hard part with Matthews is we do need that speed, we do need the explosion, and I feel like our probably most threatening offensive scheme would be Stills, Parker, and Landry, because Stills is so fast and he's so good in space, and Parker is so good vertically down the field to match up. And obviously Jarvis Landry's he's just a god. He does things you just can't believe. And so Rashard Matthews is the perfect addition to play the role that Jarvis Landry plays. And that's probably what you'll see him do next year. I think the chances, unless we have some like serious injuries that would necessitate Miami needing wide receiver, I just can't see them being able to pay him, because I think he's going to get paid well to go be a slot receiver for another team, because he's proven this year he can make tough catches. No, I'm really not worried about that. I'm not, because he's not a New England molded receiver. New England likes these really quick receivers that
like Julian Edelman.
Yeah, Wes Welker. That's their type of guy.
That was
I don't think
Chad.
No,
and
but
the other thing
will pay Rashard Matthews to come and be their man in the middle of their field. I'm telling you right now, he's big, he's tough, he's not exceptionally fast, but he can make very tough catches, and so he's an ideal guy to have in the middle of the field.
And I want him, doggone it.
I'd love to keep him, but that's just
And to your point, some team that's going to pay at the end of the day, Rashard Matthews doesn't realize he took a long time to come along in this Dolphins system. He's going to be a frustrating player for the next team that signs him at first. I think it takes him a while to pick up the offense and pick up those nuances. But I think once he does, like now he has a handle in the Dolphins offense, he's a successful player. And Lewis, to what you're saying, I think what could be going on with Greg Jennings, I mean, it could be his age catching up with him throughout a season.
But it was in the preseason, and he sucked from game one.
I don't know that he was this bad during the preseason, though. He wasn't this bad, and I think after a full training camp.
Max, what I meant was that he was good in training camp and preseason, and then game one of the regular season, Greg Jennings just suddenly turned bad.
No, he's here
I think you're right, but it's been getting worse, too. It continues to get worse. And I think it could be that wear and tear. I mean, in the South Florida heat, training camp is a lot harder on players in the Dolphins than it is on a lot of teams who might practice indoor or who practice in a more moderate climate. It could have taken a toll on him. I'm not sure, but it's entirely possible that could be explaining his struggles. Just his age.
And I'm not down. Like, I think Greg Jennings is a really cool guy. I like him and his personality, but I mean, let's just be real here.
He's great.
Greg Jennings, when he was prominent, his quarterback was Aaron Rodgers. And when he left Green Bay, Greg Jennings has not been any kind of thing that I would consider a dominant wide receiver. And, you know, it's probably a lot easier to look really good when you get to play with Aaron Rodgers. I'm just saying that.
You saw James Jones get cut by 2 or 3 teams and then go back to Green Bay, walks on the field, and we, just absolutely led the offensive receiving for the first few weeks of the season.
Like he never left.
I mean,
that's
exactly the things that Packers offense is capable of doing, unbelievable.
He's a bad man.
Yeah, it's nice when you get to play with probably the best. I mean, and Aaron Rodgers, he really is. He's very good.
It's a privilege to watch him. I mean, even when we get to just see him play, I mean, he is an unbelievable player, and he makes those receivers better. And that's, I think, the kind of team that Rashard Matthews could thrive on. You know, if Green Bay's not going to be able to sign him, because if the amount of money that also Green Bay just doesn't sign free agents, not what they do, but a team with a good quarterback who is dominant like that could take Rashard Matthews immediately. But for Rashard Matthews to have to take the time to learn the offense, I don't think he's going to be an instant impact player anywhere else. And it's entirely possible that he wants to stay in Miami. I mean, we've seen the Dolphins be able to extend players in friendly ways, like what you were talking about with Cameron Wake. His contract was friendly when we extended him. And then you take a look at what Ryan Tannehill did. Tannehill's contract was a friendly contract for the team. I mean, there was a clear, very friendly contract for the team.
But it is, and it isn't.
We'll keep Lewis's sanity. We'll keep Lewis's sanity, and we'll stay away from the Tannehill talk.
Yes,
but
please.
It's Don Aponte in the Dolphins organization does a very good job of making these extensions work. I mean, we've kept Cameron Wake for a long time. We extended Tannehill in a friendly way. We extended Pouncey in a friendly way. She makes it so we can keep these players. They might struggle with free agent contracts, but that's the point of talent evaluation.
It's a trade-off. I mean, football is a very dangerous sport, and so as the team, when the player gives you a discounted contract, you're sharing the risk, and so you're basically saying, look, we could have you play at the league minimum for another year, or at a rookie contract for another year, which saves us a lot of cap money, and that helps us for that year. But for that player, they're more willing to take maybe not the same contract they get after the season, which would be more.
You're right. Players lose leverage. Players lose leverage.
They've got to play a whole year. You don't. Let's say you put yourself in that situation, and let's say you're in your third or fourth year of your contract, and you've been making rookie money, and which to us would seem like a lot of money, but let's say you've put away $1 million or whatever it is, but that's all you've made, and your next contract you're going to make like $20 to $30 million. Then you start to think about what are the chances of me getting hurt this year, and if I
look at Andrew Luck. Yeah. Andrew Luck took the opposite route of Ryan Tannehill. We were talking about Andrew Luck getting a fully guaranteed contract or being one of the highest paid players in NFL history, which he very well could be.
Yeah.
News just came out today. He has a lacerated kidney and an abdominal injury, and he's been playing poorly this year. I mean, I'm not among the people who think that Andrew Luck isn't as good as he's going to be. I think he's going to be a great quarterback.
You've got a point where he has not improved his value. Sometimes it's your performance, but the big one's an injury. If you completely, destroy your knee, then you've significantly dropped your value. And so if you can say, all right, my choice is I can risk that, or I can take $20 million right now over the next 4 or 5 years, or I can wait and risk it to try to make 25 or 30 million over that contract, but I've got to play a whole year and not have any serious injuries. And that's where you balance it out as a team. You're deciding, look, as the team, we'll risk taking on that big guarantee over the life of that contract when we could have just played him cheap and had one more year out of him, but we want him here long term. And I think Miami needs to be doing more of that. I would love for them to do that with Lamar Miller right now and say, look, I know there's a chance he's going to get hurt in the next 8 games, so then we'll be in a bad shape if, the last game of the year he destroys his knee and then we've paid him all that money. But on the flip side, you don't want to see them having to go get another running back next year, and you end up maybe with a subpar running game because of it. So it's
and his contract won't break the bank. I mean, his agents are going to come to the table and say, we want Justin Forsett's deal. That's what they're going to go for. And Justin Forsett's deal is very affordable. So, I mean, it'll probably come down a little bit from that. I don't know that Lamar Miller is as good of a running back as Justin Forsett is. But I think on the free agent market, he obviously commands more than that. Lamar Miller, and the same can be said for Olivier Vernon, but I don't think he'll stick around next year.
I'd be glad if he left.
He grew up in Miami. He went to University of Miami. He wants to play for the Dolphins. I mean, he wants to be in Miami. That's his home. So there's going to be something in contract negotiations where they know Lamar Miller would want to stay.
And the reality is running backs don't get paid big on the market. So I'm not worried about Lamar Miller getting this massive contract offer because most teams are going to look at him and say, we'll just try to also do it in the draft. I'm just saying Miami has so many other needs in their draft that I would wish they would just remove running back from it if they could get a reasonable deal in place with Lamar Miller. And I think you're right. Olivier Vernon, he's a hard one to tell because he has done nothing, in my opinion, to show that he's an elite defensive end or a Pro Bowl level defensive end. To me, he's
now developed these conduct issues where he's picking up stupid penalties. And is it that we need him? Do we need that? I mean, you guys remember in the Jacksonville game.
Hard to forget.
No, I personally would, if you were asking me now, and this is hard to say, but I would say I would want to go into next year with Deion Jordan as my starting right defensive end, Terrence Fredea as my left, and then address it in the draft, or maybe some talent in free agency. But just address it.
I'm very worried.
I wouldn't be comfortable.
Yeah, but
I'm not
my
comfortable
thought is
with Deion Jordan. I mean, physically.
Financially,
I know that.
Take turns.
Go ahead, Max. You're good.
I mean, we saw. I mean, I know, Louis, you and I talked about it earlier, like during the preseason, when we saw those pictures of Deion Jordan. I mean, he's hanging out in the Caribbean with some girls while his team is playing in the preseason. He's got his gut hanging out. I know the pictures don't really mean anything. I mean, we also have pictures of Eddie Lacy 2 years ago where he looked like a bowling ball. But
he is a bowling ball, except he uses it.
Well, he is a bowling ball, but not in a good way. But it was disheartening to see those pictures of Deion Jordan looking like that. And I mean, Chad, I totally agree with you. If he was a reliable player, it would be great to be able to let Olivier Vernon go and roll with him, but I just don't know.
Well, I am not. I absolutely wouldn't say I would go sign Deion Jordan to big money, but the reality for Miami is they've already put the money in him. I mean, they've already paid the big bonuses out, and it's already been prorated over his contract. And so Deion Jordan is not going to be a massive salary cut. They're not going to get a lot of cap space to cut him. He's exceptionally talented, and
He just needs to get his head in order.
Well, he's not reliable. I'll absolutely go with that, but I think it's even more risky to put a bunch of money into Olivier Vernon in a contract right now because he's started a lot of games and he's been starting opposite of Cameron Wake now with Ndamukong Suh, and so he's been getting some favorable matchups. And so my opinion is if Olivier Vernon was somebody that you want playing defensive end long term, he should be at 6 or 7 sacks. He should be extremely difficult for other teams to defend. And he just doesn't stand out to me as a player that's dominant. He's not. I'm not saying he's bad. He's not like a liability. He's terrible, but he does not. Have you ever seen Olivier Vernon take over a game like Cameron Wake has? It just doesn't happen. And so my thought is, they've got to decide where they want to spend money very judiciously. And I would rather bring a rookie in on defensive end and have him, maybe be your backup, and then you have to just roll the dice with Deion Jordan and hope he has his head together and you get a good year out of him. But I think they're going to need to spend money in other areas than defensive end.
All right, I totally agree with you, Chad. We're going to get ready to wrap this show up, but before we do that, I want to ask you guys, and we're actually going to change the last topic a little bit because at this point the way we've been talking this whole show, we've basically given what we think of this season is that maybe next year is about to happen all over again. So I want to ask you guys this, and I know it's early for this, but at this point we have to kind of start looking at this. Given what we know now, and in this situation, let's say the draft is tomorrow. What position are you going to pick in the first round?
Say that one more time, Lewis. What was your question again?
The question essentially is if let's say that the season was over and the draft is tomorrow, we have all the same players. What position are you drafting in the first round?
Inside linebacker, done. Inside linebacker. Get someone who can man the middle of that defense. We need someone now who, like we were all saying it earlier in the show, can clean up from Ndamukong Suh. I'm biased. UCLA's Miles Jack is a great player, and he fills exactly what we need in terms of an inside presence who can drop into coverage. But depending on how high we are, Notre Dame's Jalen Smith is a really, really special linebacker. And I think we've got to go there. I mean, I've started looking to the draft, I'm guilty to say, because of the way the season has turned out. But I really think linebackers where we have to go. If we're really high in the draft, I could see going for one of the elite defensive backs, because this is a great year to need defensive backs. There's some really special players coming out of that position.
Yeah.
But linebacker or defensive back are really the two positions I would look towards.
I agree with Max that we have to address the linebacker position. I don't know what the overall linebacker outlook is. I mean, traditionally you can typically get good inside linebackers in second rounds in drafts. We just had a bad draft this year. There just wasn't a lot in there. And so if we could get a solid inside linebacker in the second round, I'd be on board with that, because I think that it's a couple of players I'm hoping we get a really good feel for in the second half of the season is one is Wall Aikens. We need to know who the starting safety is opposite Rashad Jones.
Louis Delmas.
Oh, maybe, but that would be an extremely risky proposition after 2 serious injuries.
I don't care. Louis Delmas.
But so, I mean, that's in a position that I see on the horizon where we need to know if Wall Aikens is the guy or not. That needs to be determined. And we need to know if Jamar Taylor is the guy at the other corner, because Brent Grimes obviously just got a rough game with Sammy Watkins. But I think to expect Brett Grimes to be the shutdown corner for the next 2 to 3 years yet would probably be wishful thinking at his age and at that position. And if Jamar Taylor is not going to be a very solid corner, we could very quickly find ourselves in a position where we have a very poor secondary. And so I could easily
like a few years ago, we let like you were saying, Vontae Davis and Sean Smith left, and that's the situation we ended up in.
Vontae Davis and Sean Smith were kicked out, but go ahead.
Right, but
they left. You're right about that. Yeah, well, we want to avoid that. I entirely agree, Chad. We want to avoid that situation. Remember how depleted our secondary was that year? And we don't want to go through that again. And we don't want to keep wasting Rashad Jones because we have him right now at a very good rate for who he is. We signed him a few years ago, 2 years ago, before he became who he is now. And we need to utilize that.
That, again, was another contract given in the final year of his rookie deal where they paid him they gave him a big upgrade in his pay, but when you look at it now, it's a bargain because he's turned into an elite safety. But that's concerning to me. What our cornerback position is going to look like in the next couple of years. If Jamar Taylor isn't the guy, to me, Bryce McCain's not going to be here long term. And I don't know that Brent Grimes is going to be here long term anymore. And so we need to make sure we've got in this league. You've got to have three guys that can cover, or guys like Tom Brady just abuse you. The other thing I'm a little concerned about too, because they're so hard to get on the talent standpoint, is the offensive tackle position. I think the team going into next year and expecting Brandon Albert to play the whole year would be a pretty big dice roll as well. I mean, he's had a lot of injury issues. He's back now and he's starting to get back into form. But I would like to see them, maybe investing in an offensive tackle, sooner rather than later, because it's just been this reoccurring theme in Miami where we have got a weakness at offensive tackle, and it's hurt us a lot. And so I was kind of on the fence. I liked Jason Fox, that he played all right last year, but it doesn't look like he's the guy we want. If we're going to go into next year with Brandon Albert starting at left tackle, we need a guy that we feel very comfortable to be able to come in for him if he gets hurt. And those are positions that you may want to utilize a first-round pick on from a talent standpoint. If you can, pull off some magic and get a good inside linebacker in the second or third round. But
that's what happened like last year, and we ended up losing out. I think Denzel Perryman, we thought he was going to be there for us. The Chargers jumped over two teams, one which was us, to go get him. I'd be worried about that. I think you're entirely right. It's very, very worrisome to go into the season with Brandon Albert as like our only Brandon Albert, Juwan James, our only viable tackles, because we end up with a situation like we have right now with Jason Fox. But that's what third and fourth round players are for. They're not going to start immediately, but they're going to come in and be able to learn and get reps. And I'd much rather personally see the team go with an inside linebacker in the first round, someone who can come in and start immediately and make a difference, because if Kelvin Shepard is our starting inside linebacker, again, I'm going to pull my hair out. But it's hard to justify an offensive lineman in the first round, because I think then we end up with a situation like we have with an offensive tackle, with an offensive guard,
right.
But that we'd have to be late in the first round.
Yeah, if they were able to get a guy that's got a lot of raw talent, but he's not like NFL ready, that could be an ideal pick if they could pull some magic off that way as well. Definitely. And I definitely would not be disappointed if they brought in a very good inside linebacker to come in and play there. And one other position I'll throw out and then I'll let go is, they're going to maybe be thinking about quarterback, and not as to attack Tannehill, but is the team going to be able to afford to pay Matt Moore again? Because, he's getting paid a premium for a backup. It's not like they're overpaying him, but, you got to start thinking about ways to save money on the cap. And the reality is Matt Moore has been on the field exactly one game, or part of a game for Tannehill's whole career. And we've been paying him, the price that you could have a very solid defensive back or maybe a solid veteran lineman. And maybe it's time to start thinking about, do we need to maybe look at, invest in a high draft pick in a quarterback to start developing behind Ryan Tannehill, if for anything, to be our number 2 quarterback. And also just to be there if Tannehill just doesn't get where you expect him to be in the next couple of years. So you have it, because quarterbacks.
And Matt Moore, we're definitely overpaying Matt Moore because he was bad in the preseason. He was really bad. I mean,
yeah, he was disappointing.
Really, really bad. I mean, on par with third-string quarterbacks. So
Right.
I don't know if he was having an off month, but I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly that. And this year, with the group of quarterbacks coming out, there are a lot of developmental guys that are going to be there late who you could take as a backup. And I mean, in the 5th or 6th round, if you're sitting there with some players who might be available, guys like Christian Hackenberg from Penn State, who will probably get overdrafted, but if he was sitting there just as a backup, it's not a bad idea at all.
No, that's something I think they're going to have to consider with the day and age of the salary caps and what quarterbacks cost. I mean, a good backup quarterback is pricey, so it'd be nice.
Matt Moore's annual salary right now could end up being Lamar Miller's next year.
Exactly.
I mean, running backs have been devalued that much.
Do you want to, maybe draft a young quarterback that you start working on right away in camp and hope that nothing happens to Ryan Tannehill for a year or two, so that at least by the time you maybe have to call on that rookie, he's got some experience and he's more ready. But you weigh that against just keeping Matt Moore and then not having a near talented starting running back. Possibly, you ask which one's going to affect the team more.
Maybe sign some offensive linemen with that backup quarterback money, so we don't have to worry so much about Ryan Tannehill getting hurt. But that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, we are getting dangerously close to Tannehill talk. I'm telling you guys, I don't want it tonight. So
no, we don't need it.
Is that the answer? Is that what exactly is your answer, Chad? If you had to pick one position in the first round to jump on, which would it be?
If you were giving me the exact team they have right now, it would clearly be inside linebacker.
Okay. And
Miles Jack, UCLA. I'm telling you guys right now, Miles Jack, UCLA.
The only issue, Max, I agree with the position evaluation. I would go middle linebacker too. However, if Miles Jack is currently under injury watch again, and that's the same thing that happened with Parker, and it's the same thing that happened with these other players. I feel like that if the Dolphins go with yet another player who is banged up, who may or may not be ready for whatever reason, I feel like there's going to be a gigantic revolt. I don't think they care who the player is. Pick somebody who's ready to go right away, not somebody who we have to be hoping and praying that he will be able to play and he's not coming back from injury.
But, I mean, Jack's injury was one of the cases where he decided it wasn't as severe as initially thought, and he decided to shut down the season because he left UCLA. Not necessarily because of the injury. I think he'll be ready for the combine, and I think if they see him at the combine, unlike Devontae Parker, who didn't go through the whole draft process, if we see him at the combine, I think that would ease a lot of people's minds, but I totally agree, and I'm 100% on board with taking a player who is currently physically able.
That's the only issue I have, and just to give some perspective, Jadeveon Clowney was not originally hurt all that much, and he decided to shut it down in his last year in college, and he went number 1 overall. Let's be perfectly honest, Jadeveon Clowney has not paid those dividends.
Not even close.
So that's just something to think about. And Clowney has proven that not only is he not doing all that great when he is playing, he doesn't play that often because he's hurt a lot. So,
yep.
I would pick middle linebacker. If it turned out to be Miles Jack, a lot of the draft people I know on Twitter are very high on him. You mentioned Jalen Smith. I assume we have to be like in the top 3 to grab somebody like him because you seem to be explaining how incredible he is. But if the Dolphins,
I think at his position of inside linebacker, back end of the top 10 is probably where we'd have to get him.
Well, if the Dolphins keep this up, we'll be in the top 10 again. So there's always that possibility.
Yes, there is.
I don't know. Can we come up with something like that? I don't know. Something like I can't do suck for luck. How about
I think we're wasting that.
Flack for Jack.
Flack for Jack. It's on. No, the hashtag I've been doing is
going to be 8-8. I still predict this team's going to be 500 when it gets to the end of the year, I think.
Yeah.
So that's just the schedule
the
they have.
Hashtag you can get me. Hashtag Get Miami Jacked 2015. It's happening. 2016.
At least wait 2 weeks. If they lose the next 2 games, then go for it.
Max, I don't want anybody jacked in Miami because that just means more suspensions, okay?
We saw what happened. We saw what happened last time the first round pick was jacked.
Yeah, that turned out to be a mess. So that's gonna be it for this show. We ran for a lot longer than I initially thought we would, but I'm good. We had a great show. We had lots of discussions. No quarterback talk. I am so happy. You have no idea.
Woo!
We actually managed to get through a show without talking about Ryan Tannehill. Oh wait, let me go into my. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm serious. I'm not talking Ryan Tannehill tonight. So. I want to thank once again Greg Likens of the PhinSiders for joining us on our show. It was great having your insight. Hope to have you on again soon, man. For myself, my co-host Chad Ronnebaum and Max Himmelrich of the Deep End Miami. I want to thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a fantastic night and take care.